Good day, everybody, and welcome to another What's the Point? Today, we're going to talk with Tyler Lindholm, who's from Senator Lummis's office. And we're going to be talking, obviously, about economic development and really looking into what is the point of the policies and funding mechanisms at the state level. But today is going to be fun because we're going to talk a little bit about the federal level, as well as talk with Tyler about his time in the state, in politics in the state, and really take a look at somebody who may come off as a little bit of a cowboy, but probably knows more about technology than just about anybody listening. So pretty exciting interview today and a good talk. I'm looking forward to the discussion. I hope Tyler is too. So Tyler, before we get going, I wanted to introduce you to what we call the economic development triangle. And it's not really new or not really different, but what it is, it's really a framework for us to think about kind of who's doing what and how we all fit into economic development across our state. I think it's pretty obvious, and it's been really obvious over the last few years how important economic development is. But those communities that have done it for a long time and have gotten really good at it have shown that it's, one, a long haul, and two, it's something you have to do in good times and bad. And so this triangle really kind of helps everybody understand just where they fit in and what they can do to make a difference. And so if you kind of think about the base of that triangle, the foundation of the triangle, that's what we call the local economic development efforts. And so right there, you've got your chambers of commerce, you've got your main streets, you've got your local leadership, you've got your economic development organizations. Everybody's trying to make sure that their businesses are vibrant and that their community is welcoming to grow and welcoming to new companies coming in. And so that's really kind of across the board. And what we've found, and I'm sure you've seen this too, is that if you look at all of the communities in Wyoming, they have various states of maturity in that area. Some folks have a really, really robust economic development organization and everything works really well. In other communities, you've got somebody who's working really, really hard, but they're wearing like 5 different hats. And so the level of capacity in those communities varies wildly. And we want to raise that up with the funding that we have, the policies that we create, and the leadership and connections that we can provide. At the same time, we work in those areas as well, right? So we work with communities to build that resilience. And we want to hear from them on what's important to them so that we can help. And so really, as we look at this triangle, and as the state looks at the triangle, we say, what policies can we enact that are going to make it easier for economic development? What funding can we provide to spur on economic development and really create within a town a machine that doesn't require us? I guess if I was to say it, my dream would be that somebody said, we're doing our own economic development and we're so good we don't even need the state. That would be a great day, right? And so how do we do that? And so we have to listen in and decide what policies we create, what funding mechanisms we use, and where we use it in order to create that environment. And so with that framework, Tyler, we can kind of use that as our background and as our foundation for our discussion today of where maybe you see some things within the state, but also see some things within the federal level that can really help us do that. Sound good?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I thank you for the explanation, Josh, because a lot of that aligns with what our office, what Senator Lummis wants us to ride herd on. So it's, it makes good sense. And I've worked with you guys for years now, and not every state has what we've got.
Right.
So I'm proud of that.
And Tyler, maybe just as a way of introduction, like I said, I'm sure everybody that's going to watch this knows who you are, but if you wouldn't mind just giving us a quick background and what you're up to now, and that'd be great.
Yeah, so I'm Senator Lummis's state policy director. And so I ride herd on several policy issues in conjunction with some of our DC staff, and I get the opportunity to travel back and forth between DC and Wyoming. Thankfully, most of my time is still spent in Wyoming, thankfully. And then also on top of that, I ride herd on our economic development efforts within the state of Wyoming, and meeting with companies from across the globe, advertising, talking about Wyoming, why it's the best place to do business in the world. So I wear quite a few different hats, but we've all kind of got the same mission at Senator Lummis's office as a direct dictate from her. hey, listen, we ride for the brand, we ride for the state of Wyoming. If that means getting a small coffee shop to move into Moorcroft, Wyoming, or a new data center to move into Cheyenne, Wyoming, we're here for all of the above.
Great. And I want to talk a little bit about that role, because it seems like, and again, I'm fairly new to the game here, but it seems like that's a pretty new role for our federal delegation to have, and have somebody specifically thinking about economic development.
Yeah, absolutely, it is. It's definitely a non-traditional role within a U.S. senator's kind of bag of tricks. And we have, for instance, we had Brendan Ames doing this gig for a while, and I'm still doing my policy end of things, but Brendan went on to bigger and better things, went back to the private sector to probably make bags of money. I kind of picked up Brendan's portfolio on top of my normal stuff, and have kind of put it together. And it is a very different role. But to be fair, Senator Cynthia Lummis isn't your average U.S. senator, and she wants to make sure that, because we know a lot of bigger names operating in the space that might be looking for a new home, or to be able to expand their existing business, or for traditional businesses that already exist in the state of Wyoming to be able to further their reach outside of the state. She really wanted us to focus on that. And so here I am.
No, that role in my mind is so important, because we all do ride for the brand. And I think we all think about Team Wyoming, and how do we play our different parts there, and how do we, utilize those connections, and also utilize our view of the world in order to make Wyoming more resilient. And so let's talk a little bit about that as the policy, as a policy person for her. How do you see the differences between state policy and federal policy, and how do we utilize that for better economic development?
Right. So, and that's a great question, Josh, because this kind of goes hand in hand with what can be accomplished with our state legislature, or city councils or county commissioners, all of the above. Obviously, the federal government has a big piggy bank as far as their economic development opportunities. So I'd say right off at the top of the shelf, we want to make sure that our communities and our businesses know of economic opportunities that are available through those grant processes, those types of aspects. But also, as something that not a lot of people probably think of traditionally, and maybe this is kind of brings out my boss's libertarian streak a little bit, is the fact that there are holes in federal laws where states can really stretch their legs and take advantage of opportunities that would be attractive to businesses to come into that state. And so making our state legislators aware of that. I'm in constant contact with several state legislators on the senator's behalf, saying, hey, you should talk to this company or that company, or we should look at this law or that law. And thankfully, we're served by some pretty great state legislators, so they're pretty responsive in that regard. And so just thinking outside of the box stuff, trying to think of things that nobody else is really thinking of to make Wyoming more competitive.
Right. So Tyler, in that regard, thinking about, the purview that you have, one of the things that I think we see this a lot, right? Where Wyoming, we like to be Wyoming, and we like to look at our neighbors in Wyoming as maybe if you're in Casper, you're looking at Gillette, and you're looking down the road at Cheyenne, and you're looking at Douglas. Those are your neighbors, but you have now a view at the federal level where you can kind of see what some of our neighbors, and maybe not even our next door neighbors, but people within the United States and states, what they're doing maybe a little differently. Are there elements that you're seeing right away from a policy point of view that maybe, like you said, our state legislature could consider or should be considering in the next year or two?
Yeah, and I'll give you kind of an overarching ideology on that, and it's something that I've talked about with Senator Lummis, and I can't agree more with her. The reality of our economic developments in the state of Wyoming, we're not here for the growth for the sake of growth ideology. I don't think anybody's along those lines, right? That's like the ideology of a cancer cell, just growth for the sake of growth. The reason why we want to grow and expand these businesses has to do with our other, our biggest natural resource in the state of Wyoming. And I know a lot of people have heard that time and time again. Our biggest natural resource is our children, and that is absolutely correct. The problem we've got as far as an investment level or at least a problem that Senator Lummis sees, is that we invest so much money into our generation, and that stance has been there from the very get-go of statehood for Wyoming. Education is of the utmost importance, so we invest thousands and thousands of dollars throughout the history, throughout the lifetime of a child going through public education, onto college or trade school or what have you. And so that's a huge investment. And then after that, where do they go? Well, for a lot of them, there's not an economic opportunity for them in the state of Wyoming. Maybe they go into the College of Engineering at the University of Wyoming, and they pick up a trade as far as in regards to coding or development or something like that. Well, those opportunities are kind of sparse in the state of Wyoming. And so the ideology on economic development has to be not only bringing up our existing businesses so they can be more successful, but also bringing in new types of businesses that could possibly keep that investment, i.e. our children, within the state of Wyoming so that they can raise their children. And that ideology, you can see that in some of those other states. And I'm not going to take away from the existing efforts that have happened in the state of Wyoming. I think they've brought us to a place where we're more financially sound than, we're at the top of the pile as far as other states. Our financial outlook for the state of Wyoming is robust and strong, and that's something to be proud of. However, if you look at the different opportunities that states have taken to be able to attract industry, I think there's a little bit of a difference, and some of those things we've started copying wholeheartedly. So one of the things that we're doing a little bit different than other states is, and it's an opportunity that we all enjoy in the state of Wyoming, that we all kind of take for granted, but it's pretty cool, is the fact that most of us know who our governor is. We know him on a personal basis. And one of the things that I really like to do and take the opportunity to do is, whenever my boss is back from DC and she's in the state, we load her with meetings, as does Senator Barrasso, so that she can make acquaintances with these new types of companies or existing companies. And that's really an important thing. And I know the governor does the same thing, and state legislators are doing those things. Other states don't really have that opportunity, but it's a kind of a numbers game, right? There's only 580,000 of us versus the millions and millions of people that live in California. So we have those opportunities. And then also on top of that, one thing that other states have, Colorado is really well known for this, is Colorado's kind of flex their muscle on the federal government time and time again, as far as their different policies. And so I think as far as our state legislature is concerned, I don't think we necessarily need to adopt the same policies that Colorado have, but be looking at that 10th Amendment flex as far as the types of things that as a state you can get away with. Looking at our existing, for instance, agriculture and beef, for example. That is an entirely too controlled industry, where we've gotten down to the point where only 4 major packers in the United States control the beef supply, and we saw just how fragile that ecosystem is. Well, let me explain that. I guess we said the rest of the world saw how fragile that ecosystem is, whereas people in Wyoming already knew how fragile it was. Those are the types of regulatory areas where, if we really put in some hard work, and this would be a challenge to the Wyoming ag committees, is to really do a deep dive and figure out how we can break up that monopoly even more, so that we have the opportunities where in Meeteetse, Wyoming, you can go into town and have a steak that was raised right a mile outside of the town, where you can go to Evanston, Wyoming, and have that same opportunity for local product. And so finding those regulatory policies where we could crack the egg a little bit. Surely the federal government's going to be mad at us. That's all right. We've got John Barrasso and Cynthia Lummis there to carry the water for us. So run the ball, go crazy.
So I guess just to kind of recap what you're saying there, it's less about what the policy is and how they utilize their rights as a state to make the policies that make the most sense for their citizens in the state. And
Yep.
so maybe that might mean pushing the federal government a little bit. It might mean making things a little bit uncomfortable and trying to kind of push the edge a little bit so that we can, again, take care of our citizens. Is that what you're saying?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I would say the same would be true for local municipalities and pushing on the state, and county commissioners pushing on the state. That's all a great mix, and we'll just have cream rise to the top in that type of situation. So, I think we can really, by a little bit of, maybe bumping heads against each other, we can probably figure some pretty wild stuff out.
Well, just philosophically, I like the approach of saying, look, we may have to do things that are not comfortable. We may have to do things that we haven't done before, because if we want something different, we're going to have to do things differently. Right. And so, that doesn't mean going wild, but it does mean taking care of our industries. And it does mean looking for those new ones. You did a good job of laying out the investment that we make in our kids. And really what we're making is an investment into that next generation of Wyoming, right? To keep its relevant for a long, long time, and to make sure that we're strong into the future. One of the areas that we do see, and you mentioned, is the idea of technology and maybe some advanced manufacturing, some new industries. And you've always had a really strong technology bent. Well, at least as far as I know, you've always had a technology bent, and you've really kind of looked at how do we utilize technology to better our state. And so, a couple of things. I guess I have a few questions for you now that, again, you've kind of risen to a level where you're seeing across the entire nation. What are some things that we should be doing that we're not doing today to encourage technology companies, to encourage that advanced manufacturing? What are some things that you see we could do?
I think one of the, I guess, and that's a super good question, because this is the question that I think all of us that work in this space it's constantly on our mind, right? How can I be more effective and helpful when I get that phone call, right? Because we all get these phone calls all the time from different companies. Hey, I'm thinking about coming to Wyoming, or hey, I'm an existing Wyoming business. How can I do X? And the really tough part in that scenario is it depends on, where they're at and what they're doing. So I think most of the folks that get a hold of a US Senator's office, or what we've recently seen, or at least it's fresh on my mind, is that the Aerospace and Defense Conference, I just saw you at, Josh, where it was down in Casper, Wyoming. And so I think the biggest thing would be make more connections. Connecting, for instance, I just met an organization that's based in Cheyenne, Wyoming, that works on artificial intelligence for the purpose of space exploration. And they're based in Cheyenne, Wyoming. It's absolutely crazy. The founder and CEO is a former employee of JPL, and he counts on his contracts, NASA, and those types of organizations. So how can we make that entity, for example, have those better contacts and have those better hookups? And that's a tough one, right? Because I don't have any contacts at NASA. I don't know Elon Musk, but I'm gonna figure out how to get in contact. Right. I'm gonna figure out how to get those guys' attention for the specific purpose, and only purpose, of making that company more successful in the state of Wyoming, because they took a gamble on Wyoming. They took that gamble that their business is going to be better served here, and I'd like to prove them right. So it involves a lot of emails and a lot of phone calls and cold calls, and I think a lot of times people are just surprised to be hearing from different folks. For instance, in this situation, right down the hall at the Senate Russell building is a liaison for the U.S. Air Force, U.S. Army, U.S. Navy, U.S. Coast Guard, and the Marines. Right down the hall from my boss's office, Senator Lummis's office, and her office is at Russell 124. So right down the hallway are all those liaisons. So last week when I was there, I just marched right on down there, and I said, hey, I've got this industry here in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and I'd love to put them in contact. So right now I'm waiting on emails back. If I don't hear back, then I'm going to blow them up in their email inbox and just try to push the envelope for folks like that, so that they can have that, maybe better connections, and maybe they'll be bumped up the contract list a little bit when they're competing against other entities from throughout the nation. Obviously, we want Wyoming to win, right? A Wyoming win is good for everybody. So those opportunities are pretty integral. And I think making more connections, keeping everybody's Rolodex up to date.
Yep. Yeah, that company that you're mentioning, that's a really interesting company for a lot of reasons, right? In the technology world, they do some really incredible stuff, but it's also a really interesting one because of the way that they have gone after those, small business innovative research grants from the federal government. And then once they got those, they were able to extend their runway by utilizing a state program that matches that SBR. We happen to administer it, but that legislation actually got refunded, right? It kind of sunset, and then it was refunded because it's so effective. I think that's a really good example of how to utilize the sort of the national programs to vet companies, to understand what they're up to and see if they fit, and then help with state funding to extend their runway, because that is such a tough thing to commercialize innovative research.
Right. Well, it's so tough, and there's a lot shaken out, Josh. I mean, there's an outfit that's in the business of biotech that's currently looking at moving into Laramie, Wyoming. And so, I mean, that presents a whole nother level of questions. What do our laws look like around biotech? I don't know. I have no clue in the state of Wyoming. Is the University of Wyoming interested in working with a biotech industry? Of course they are. I mean, that's the thing. And so it's wild times that we're living in, but we've got to grab them all.
Yeah. Yep. Well, you mentioned, what do the laws look like, and how do we help as a state? And sometimes having coming from a little bit of a technology background, when you have an old set of code that's running your whole operation, it's actually harder to restart and do some new things because you have all this technical debt, so to speak. And Wyoming, I think in a lot of areas we haven't been in some of these games for a long time. So we don't have any of that technical debt. We don't have anything that we have to change. We're starting from a clean slate, and we can make those things happen. Right. And that's pretty exciting. Right. You were heavily involved in what I'll call some really clean slate legislation in Wyoming on blockchain and some of those things and digital assets. Can you talk a little bit about that process, and maybe, where are some other areas that we should take a hold of that and run? So there's that one. And then obviously, how do we extend that legislation or keep us in the lead and leverage it to the fullest?
Right. Well, a good question. Those were wild times. I mean, we first started taking a really hard look at those things back in, I think I ran my first bill on digital assets in 2016. And I was just absolutely slaughtered in committee. I mean, that's one of the secrets of the blockchain thing, and that not many people know about, is technically my first bill died hard. And it was just one bill, and it was making, all it did was state that digital assets were a permissible investment under the money transmitter laws in the state of Wyoming. And I went after it the completely wrong way. And it was such a good learning experience for me, because I went to the Minerals Committee, the House Minerals Committee, in 2016. And I had this bill about digital assets, and I was going to talk about Bitcoin and all those things to a group of people that really never heard of it before. And I was going to convince them that this is a great technology and we should embrace it. My missing loop was the why. And so when I went into that committee, I think I got one vote in favor, and everybody else voted against me, and my bill went down. The thing that I learned is I had to have a hook for everybody else, right? Just because I'm excited about something, and I'm excited about helping a very small population in the state of Wyoming that currently we're in digital assets, doesn't mean that is going to be a trigger for these individuals. And so that in 2017, 2018, I think it was, we ran our first big 5 pieces of legislation on digital assets and blockchain technology. And I went into those committee meetings with a very different viewpoint. Instead of being there to talk about why this is such a cool piece of technology, I went in there to talk about economic development and the opportunity it presented the state of Wyoming, because nobody was looking at what we had in those first 5 bills. Nobody had those, and we had put together a great group of a team of legislators, everybody from David Miller out of Riverton, Wyoming, Jared Olson out of Cheyenne, Wyoming, to Chris Rothfuss, that's a senator out of Laramie, Wyoming, up and down the state. We had this great group of people, and we all ran the ball. Ogden Driscoll, for example, a lot of people look at me and don't think tech, but no, I mean, Ogden Driscoll, nobody really thinks tech at all. I mean, he's a cowboy out of Devil's Tower country. So we ran the ball on this opportunity of economic development, and we made lots of big proclamations about how we think this could be done. And one of the craziest things happened that I saw economically shaping out and shaking for the state of Wyoming is right after we introduced that bevy of bills. It was within a day, just because we had introduced the bills, a company in Nova Scotia, Canada, shut down their business in Canada and immediately filed their business in Cheyenne, Wyoming. And the bills hadn't even passed. And so I was like, holy cow, we might actually have something here. This might actually work. Imagine if we passed these bills. And then we did pass these bills, and we saw, the first real kind of big trickle of new domiciles coming into the state of Wyoming, and companies, people started showing up in Cheyenne to testify on these pieces of legislation. And then it just grew from there. And where we're currently at right now is the Wyoming legislature still has the Select Blockchain Committee, a committee dedicated to staying on top of this, where they hear about ideas and they amend our existing laws to actually better reflect consumer care and consumer protection, and then also the industry. They do that every year, every interim. They're constantly looking at this. And that model kind of follows what South Dakota had done with credit cards back in the 80s and early 90s.
Yep.
And now all of East River, South Dakota is covered with Visa, MasterCard, and banks and trust companies and those types of things. So that's where the model comes from. And now that model, as far as what we've created in the state of Wyoming, has started to spread across states. So your question was, what are we doing to stay on top of that? They've got to stay on top of it, and they've got to keep innovating in policy. And they've got to keep innovating in regards to Wyoming's laws so that we can stay on top of this, so that we can attract and keep attracting. And one of the interesting, I think one of the coolest things that's happened because of that, there's an electrical contractor in Casper, Wyoming, that's been there for 50, 60 years, automated electronics. And they do phenomenal work across the state of Wyoming and across the US, particularly for the oil and gas industry. And they just showed off last week their first Bitcoin mining pod, where they're actually manufacturing those pods themselves and doing it themselves. And so for me, that was a really cool kind of hook, that not only were we able to attract new businesses, but existing businesses were able to take advantage of that opportunity. Pine Bluffs, Wyoming, not an area you would think is a big tech part of the state, just opened up one of their newest data centers, just shook out this last week, and that's really pretty cool. And it was because of the laws that were put in place, and the economic opportunity that was created by essentially getting out of people's way, but also creating some consumer protection around that space. And so they used local electricians and local contractors to do all of that work. And so I guess moving forward, where we're at right now, and we've seen this work, where we need to move from there is we need to look across the spectrum. Obviously, the financial sector needs to be looked at pretty hard. The financial sector is an ever-growing, especially around financial technology, is an ever-growing area. So, for the folks listening to this, think long and hard about what that looks like. What does an existing community bank look like to you? And is there a possibility that you could help your local community bank see opportunities that they've never seen before? That's employees hired at the local level to handle those opportunities. So that's a great part about it. So I would definitely say to look in that area. Particularly, I'm interested around the open banking area. One of my good friends, Representative Cyrus Western out of Sheridan, I know is studying that topic and is bringing it forward to the Wyoming legislative interim this summer. So that'll be an interesting topic that shakes out. And anyways, there's a bunch of wild stuff that could happen.
Yeah. So Tyler, let's do this for a second. So you were before we got on here, you were mentioning that you were a little sore from doing a whole bunch of brandings this weekend and helping out, which is pretty cool. You don't get much more like on the ground economic development than that, right? Like that's
right.
That's pretty economic development. And so you're clearly not afraid to get your hands dirty, but at the same time, right. you spend time back in DC. So you see this triangle and maybe, beyond the triangle, because you're talking at the federal level. So let's maybe take those three things kind of at a local level. What should folks be doing? At a state level, how do we continue to keep economic development moving forward? And then at a federal level, talk about some of the big things. And this kind of recaps some of the things that you've said, but you see it all. So if you don't mind just kind of walking through that'd be great.
Yeah, no. And so this is actually talked about branding this weekend. I think for a lot of people that are listening, they do the same thing that I do every weekend or as often as possible in the spring. This is my favorite time of year. You get to get out there and help your neighbors work their cattle, work their calves, and get sore and maybe get a little something on your boots. It's a great time of year in the state of Wyoming. I absolutely love it. But as far as that local level is concerned, actually something shook out this morning when I posted a picture of my daughter wrestling. My daughter's wrestling calves, and I posted it up on Twitter. And somebody asked, well, what about the Rocky Mountain oysters? Because I made the comment that with this time of year is all about burning butts and cutting nuts, and they asked about those Rocky Mountain oysters, and I had the opportunity at that point to say, well, actually, Beulah, Wyoming hosts their annual testicle festival. That's what it's called. It's a Beulah testicle festival, and it's held for the purpose of funding the Beulah Volunteer Fire Department. And it's a great event. So I was able to post a link to that and said, I hope you can be there, show up, show out and support. And the proceeds go to the local volunteer fire department. It also benefits the local bars that are right there and restaurants, as far as people that maybe don't want to partake in the Rocky Mountain oysters can go right to the restaurant. And so I think those types of local opportunities, as far as economic development, making sure that you're showing up to the fundraisers, that you're out and about, spend a little extra time, and maybe if you got a couple extra bucks with these local volunteers, because those do trickle down into those local businesses, and then obviously shop local. Going up to the state level.
Hey, before we jump to that, let's talk about that a little bit, because I think sometimes, and I know I'm guilty of this because I'm always thinking about like policy and funding and all of that. Sometimes it is those simple things at a local level that we need to remember, and those don't require any kind of legislation or crazy things that happen. Right. It requires a bunch of people to get together and say, hey, we ought to have a 3-on-3 basketball tournament out in the parking lot and start rounding people up. I think there's one of those up at Thermopolis every summer, and I bet it packs people in. And so thinking about some of those things that start out really small can grow if you continue to do them. And I think if you could get enough people together, you're right. It benefits all of the businesses in town. It benefits the local charities. It benefits everybody, and all those dollars do change hands a bunch of times and trickle down. So I like that, and you know what? That makes it so that everybody can have a part in it and have a hand in it. So that's cool. Thanks for bringing that up. I appreciate that.
Yeah. No, and it really is which, by the way, Josh, if you can make it, the Beulah Testicle Festival. It costs like $15 for a plate of Rocky Mountain oysters, whether you want to eat them or not. Goes to the local volunteer fire department, and then you can buy yourself a beer right at the bar.
Right on. Well, thank you. What are the dates there? When is it?
Actually,
I'm
going to pull it up right now, because it is a really fun event. Which, by the way, my daughters are making me feel really old. I don't know if you've got kids, Josh, don't you? I know you do. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. It's nuts how old. All right. Here's the link. It's on Facebook.
Okay.
So they invite. So it's June 4th. It's held right there at Saloon 333 in Beulah, Wyoming. And as they say on this, you're going to have a ball at the Beulah Testicle Festival.
That's great. That's great.
Yep.
All right. Well, it's going to be hard to change gears on that one for sure. But again, I think the point is that you can create economic development at a local level actually pretty easily. And and again, building upon that and having your local leadership, whether they be an economic developer, part of the chamber, a business owner, or then the folks at the county or the municipality leadership, getting their level of economic development a little higher. What are things that the state can do to kind of help that transition?
Right. So as far as what the state can do to help that transition, first of all, I think this is an area that I am definitely guilty of myself, and I know other state legislators, this is going to hurt your feelings a little bit. But the reality is, if you've got a local municipality that's running the ball and trying to find ways to do this economic development opportunities, and maybe there's a law standing in their way, be their best friend. Go hand in hand. Some of these local city councils or chamber boards are just out there working their tail off. And if we can find an opportunity for the state to get out of their way, maybe a little more home rule. I know there's some municipalities that might be hearing me say that and flinching when Tyler Lindholm says we need to support home rule a little bit. It's not my normal stance, but it's something I've come to realize and grown to the fact that, if you do have a municipality or a county that's running the ball, by golly, let's go grab them by the arms and see if we can help them as much as possible. But then on top of that, state leaders need to also be thinking about these economic opportunities like South Dakota's done, like Wyoming's done, and finding a way to really take advantage of those. Speaker Harshman, when he was a Speaker of the House, and I was serving as Majority Whip, he put it out. I was chairman of the Corporations Committee. Also, he put it out that he wanted every committee to come up with an economic development idea for the next session coming around. And it doesn't mean they had to run a bill on it. Just let's look at it for every different type of committee. So for corporations, the Corporations Committee, that's pretty simple for us. We just needed to look at, we had several jurisdictions such as liquor laws or corporate law, those types of things. What can we clean up to make it easier and better to domicile in the state of Wyoming, or maybe for new businesses to move in? For the Revenue Committee, as far as cleaning up our tax code, for the Minerals Committee, that's an easy one. How do we dig more mines? and so those types of opportunities, I really think we need to push hard on, and I hope if any state legislators are listening to this, happy to help as part of Senator Lummis's team. Please give me a call because we really do need to think outside of the box.
Yep. Yeah, and you bring something up that I do think it's easy to get caught up in the things that we need to add to help out, but we also need to be thinking about what are the things that we need to take away. What are the programs that we need to just cut so we're not spending time on them that don't really have that benefit. I know that when I came aboard, one of the first things I asked is, all right, what programs are we going to cut? And folks looked around like, well, what do you mean? And I was like, well, we clearly have things that we've carried around that don't do any good, right? Like they're not economic development, but we still do them. What can we do to cut that? And I think that's an area where you have to put a little focus, and you have to say, if there's something that's dragging us down or has marginal benefit, we may have to cut that and start something new, right? Like give us the opportunity to start something new by cutting that. So I think that's a really good point. If there's something to get us out of the way, so, and make it easier for businesses, not just what can we add to it. Yep. I like that a lot. All right. So now the federal level, what's coming at us? So obviously a whole bunch of money is coming at us. And we're doing our best to take advantage of it, even though a lot of us are like, oh, I'm not sure I love this, but at the same time, I don't want Wyoming to miss out. So talk to me about that.
Yeah. So the federal level, one of the interesting things that have shaken out is a lot of these programs were created in large packages, like the infrastructure bill, those types of things. They cost, trillions of dollars. Senator Lummis is a conservative through and through. Not going to vote for that. Not going to vote for creating cash out of new air. The bill passed. Now those opportunities are there. Senator Lummis, just because her one vote against those trillions of dollars doesn't mean that she doesn't want that economic opportunity in the state of Wyoming. It's important to remember that they're like huge packages, right? And so Senator Lummis's vote doesn't reflect that she doesn't want that money in the state of Wyoming, but there's something attached to that bill that she couldn't vote for. And so we've got to take advantage of those grant opportunities, which is a tough gig. I mean, when most people hear the word grant, it's tough. They flinch. But my argument back at that would be, if we're not going to go for those opportunities here in the state of Wyoming, that money is going to be spent no matter what. It's just going to be spent not in Wyoming. And we would be fools. We would be foolish to pass up those opportunities. So we've got to run the ball on that. So if you're a private business owner that's listening to this, run the ball. If you wasted if ultimately right now you're a no on that grant by not filling out any paperwork, you're just going to waste a little bit of time filling out that grant and putting in for those opportunities. And you might be a yes at that point. And if you're going to do those things, please also get a hold of me. And I'd be happy. I'm not going to write your grant for you, but I'd be happy to make introductions for you and help you along your way. And there might be somebody at Senator Lummis's office that might know more about that program and might be able to help you navigate those waters. So that's primarily it. But also on top of that, making sure at the federal level, one of the things that I get the opportunity to do is meet with companies constantly. And so my first thing that I always ask people is, and I might be a little too bullish. I don't think there is a thing about being too bullish about Wyoming, but I always ask companies whenever I meet them, whether I'm at the Miami Bitcoin conference or I'm at the Aerospace and Defense conference there in Casper, wherever it might be, all the way down to San Diego, up to Harvard. The list goes on as far as the places that Senator Lummis sends me. And every one of those companies, I ask them all the same question: where's your business located? And they'll tell me, and I say, okay, that's great. Where is it domiciled at? And a lot of them, will know, some won't. And so then I just start breaking down on why their state sucks. I just ask them simple questions. Are you paying a corporate income tax? Are you, what does it look like for your domiciling every year? What kind of laws are in place to protect you as a business? What kind of consumer protection is in place? Do you want to meet some state legislators so you can decide for yourself on whether or not you could work in this environment, those types of things? And that's been largely pretty successful, where we get those companies that all of a sudden, we'd much prefer that they move their business wholesale into the state of Wyoming, boots on the ground. That would be great. And we've gotten a number of those. We've got a manufacturing outfit that moved out from Washington State that is now manufacturing in Cheyenne, Wyoming, based on that type of conversation. But for a lot of them, we just get their domicile, which is still great. Right? We still will, even if it's just that. I want a piece of the pie if I can't get the whole pie. And those types of opportunities at the federal level, I think, is really where we can be more effective as far as moving the ball forward as far as economic development. But it does come down to a lot of it. It does come down to the grant process, the federal grant process, making sure that our Wyoming businesses know about those opportunities, and then attracting new businesses into the state.
Yep. Yeah. And I really like what you said about, it may go against your grain. It may go against your belief system to say this is the way the federal government should be spending money. However, once that happens, we definitely have to take advantage of it. And because as you said, that money's going to get spent, and let's try to get it spent in Wyoming to secure Wyoming's future, really. And that's the way I've been kind of looking at it. And as we think about all of the infrastructure money that came, the ARPA money that came, the CARES Act money that came, how do we make sure that we make the most use of it for a really small, populated state? Frankly, we don't have a high population. How do we make the most use of it so that we're really relevant into the future? And I think that's the part where I'm seeing people go, yeah, I'm not in love with this idea, but I'm definitely not in love with the idea of that money going somewhere else. Right. And when we can move it to secure our future. And I think that's a point that we see a lot of it, right? We're independent. We want to secure our own future, But if somebody's willing to invest in us and help us along, and that money has it always has strings, but
Yep.
we can deal with those.
Mhm.
And we can handle that. I definitely agree that we need to take advantage of it, because it's probably not going to come around for a long, long time. So,
Right.
Tyler, with that, we have covered a lot of this darn triangle. So I'm glad that we got a chance to talk about it today. Anything else that you want to leave us with, or anything else you want to say to kind of conclude our talk here?
Well, one of the bigger things that has really stood out to me over that, every step that I've gone as far as my economic development journey in policy is concerned, I've always seen someone there from the Wyoming Business Council as part of those discussions, as part of those decisions. So I really can't state how much I appreciate your guys' activity in the state. Everybody from Ron Goldberg to Wendy Lopez to yourself. A lot of activity happening in the state of Wyoming. So if you are a Wyoming business, or you're just a leader in your community, well, not just a leader in your community, but you are a leader in your community, make sure to touch base. Just constantly keep reaching out to the Wyoming Business Council as far as their opportunities and what they're currently up to, because something might come up that might be a really good opportunity. And then, of course, keep an eye out for those businesses that are reaching out to the Wyoming Business Council. These guys are constantly putting out information as far as businesses that are interested in a certain type of economic area, and that might just match your little town. And by golly, then we've got a whole new opportunity for some of your local high school graduates or people that already live there. And it's those opportunities, there is a bunch of them out there, and you don't know until you try.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. And thanks for that endorsement of us, but also thanks for your time today. Cause we covered a lot. It was really good information. And, we don't get that opportunity always to kind of see it from all different angles, which you have. So thanks for your expertise and passion for Wyoming. And I know I sure appreciate it. And I know our listeners will too. So Tyler, thanks for joining us today. And thanks everybody for checking out What's the Point?